You know that feeling, right? We have one tiny nagging worry, maybe about something you said in a meeting, and suddenly it just snowballs. It avalanches. One minute you're thinking about a simple mistake, and the next you're absolutely convinced you're going to lose your job, your home, and yeah, probably end up in a van down by the river. If that mental spiral sounds familiar, you are so not alone.
This feeling is just so common. And wow, isn't that just the perfect way to describe it? This Reddit user absolutely nails it. It's this automatic process where our brain basically becomes its own worst enemy. It invents a crisis out of thin air and then works overtime trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist yet.
So this pattern, this habit, it's not just some weird quirk you have. It actually has a clinical name, catastrophic thinking. The idea really started to get traction back in the 1960s thanks to a psychiatrist named Aaron Beck. He pinpointed it as a very specific kind of cognitive distortion, a glitch in our thinking. It's this thought loop where one bad what if instantly chain reacts into an even worse one, pulling you right down a rabbit hole of fear. Dr. Daniel Amen over at the Amen Clinics has this brilliant metaphor for these thoughts. He calls them ants, automatic negative thoughts. And just like real ants, they can feel like a total infestation in your mind, right? And you can see the pattern so clearly in these examples. It's that leap from a real, valid concern, like a job, a health test, a fight, straight to the most extreme, painful, and permanent conclusion you can imagine. That right there, that's the signature of catastrophic thinking.
This is what a lot of people call worst-case scenario syndrome. It's this mental habit that can just completely hijack our peace of mind. It keeps us stuck in this constant state of high alert, just waiting for a disaster that's pretty much only happening inside our own heads. So, the big question is, why? Why do our brains fall into this trap so easily? Are we just wired for misery? Well, in a way, yeah, kinda. To really understand the feeling of catastrophizing, we have to look at the hardware it's running on. And it turns out, our brains come pre-installed with a default setting called the negativity bias. And listen, this bias, it's not a bug, it's an evolutionary feature. I mean, think about it. For our ancestors, survival depended on being hyper-alert to threats. The person who heard a rustle in the bushes and immediately thought tiger was way more likely to survive than the person who just thought, oh, it's probably just the wind. We are literally the descendants of the anxious one. And this isn't just some abstract theory, you can actually see it in brain scans. Neuroscientist John Kazipo did these studies where he showed people different kinds of images. Some positive, like a cool car or a pizza, and some negative, like a dead animal. And the brain scans showed this massive surge in electrical activity when people saw the negative stuff. Our brains literally pay more attention to the bad. To really get a sense of how much this negativity weighs on us, check this out. In relationship research, they found that for a relationship to be stable and happy, the magic ratio of positive to negative moments has to be about 5-to-1. That's right. It takes 5 compliments, 5 nice moments to balance out the emotional weight of just one nasty comment. That's the negativity bias in action. Now, while we all have this bias, some of us are definitely more likely to get stuck in those catastrophic loops. It could be that you just have a more naturally anxious temperament. Or maybe you experienced trauma or instability early in life, which basically hardwired your brain to see the world as an unsafe place. Sometimes you just learn it from watching an anxious parent do it your whole life. And having what's called cognitive rigidity, just getting stuck on one way of thinking, that plays a huge role. Okay, so let's peel back another layer and look at what is physically happening inside our brains when we get caught in one of these thought spirals. Because this isn't just in your mind, this is happening in the actual physical wiring. Every single thought you have releases chemicals. Good thoughts, you get a nice little cocktail of feel-good chemicals. But when you catastrophize, you're actively flooding your system with stress hormones and feel-bad neurochemicals. Think of it like a path in the woods. Every time you walk down that catastrophic path, you wear the groove a little deeper, making it easier and faster for your brain to take that same negative route next time. Now, the main culprit here, the part of the brain that's really running this whole fear show, is a little almond-shaped area called the amygdala. This is your brain's alarm system, its threat detection center, and brain imaging studies have shown time and time again that people who tend to catastrophize often have an overactive amygdala. It's like having a smoke detector that's so sensitive it goes off every single time you make toast. And the consequences of this overactive fear circuit can be really, really serious. There was this massive study of almost 80,000 soldiers, and it found something absolutely staggering.
When you combine the real-world stress of combat with a habit of catastrophic thinking, the risk of developing PTSD shot up by an incredible 274%. That just shows you how powerfully our own thought patterns can multiply the damage of real trauma.
All right, so we've looked at the problem, we've looked at the brain science, and it sounds kind of grim, I know. But here is the really good news. You are not stuck with this programming. Not at all. In fact, just understanding how it all works is the first giant step to changing it. So now, let's talk about how we can actively fight back and break this destructive cycle.
The main tool therapists use to fight this is a technique called, fittingly, decatastrophizing. It's also known as the what-if technique, and the core idea is just brilliantly simple. Instead of running away from that terrible worst-case scenario your brain has cooked up, you actually turn around and confront it head-on.
So here's a really practical 3-step way to do it. First, you just have to become aware. You can't change a habit if you don't even know you're doing it. So when you feel that spiral starting, just write the thought down. Look at it. Second, start to notice your triggers. Do you always do this more when you're tired or hungry or after you've had a fight with someone? Knowing your triggers is like getting a heads up. And third, and this is the absolute game changer, you have to challenge the thought. Is it really 100% true? What is the actual evidence against?
So let's say your brain throws up that big, vague, terrifying fear. I'm going to make an absolute fool of myself. Okay, the decatastrophizing question forces you to get specific. You ask, all right, but what if I do say the wrong thing? What would actually happen then? Well, maybe someone gives you a funny look. Maybe you feel embarrassed for like 10 minutes. Is that really a catastrophe? You see, you break the spiral by calmly walking through the more realistic and way less terrifying outcome. Now, it's super important to say that the goal here is not to just eliminate all negative thoughts and live in some fantasy land of forced positivity. That's not realistic, and it's probably not even healthy. The real goal is to find your cognitive balance.
So here's a fun twist. It might surprise you to learn that for all this talk about our brain's doom and gloom negativity bias, we actually have a competing system built right in. Alongside the negativity bias, which makes us overestimate threats, we also have what's called an optimism bias, which is our brain's tendency to underestimate the chances that bad things will happen to us. And you can see this optimism tied directly to our brain chemistry. In one wild study, researchers gave people a drug that boosts dopamine. And guess what happened? People became more optimistic. But here's how it worked. The extra dopamine actually made it harder for their brains to learn from bad news. They'd hear good news and update their beliefs, but they would basically just ignore negative information. And that brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Your brain is this complex machine with both a negativity setting trying to keep you safe and an optimism setting pushing you forward. Neither one of them is telling you the whole truth. Real power doesn't come from forcing positivity or ignoring the negative. It comes from developing a balanced awareness, from understanding that these biases exist and that at the end of the day, they are just stories your brain is telling you. And that awareness, that gives you the power to choose which story you're going to believe.
Understanding the mechanics of your own mind gives you the power to become the editor of your own thoughts. So I'll leave you with this question. What's the story your brain is telling you today? And is it the whole truth?